Today we're going to be talking about how to write a series, which is fun. Most of the series are like fantasy or science fiction or crime with a detective, that sort of thing. Should you write a trilogy or a series? So usually they're in fantasy, science fiction, and thriller or mystery. What's the difference between a thriller and a mystery? It's basically one thing, mystery crime. Thriller is it's personal. That's the main difference. So there's a bad guy, there's some mystery, got to solve the mystery. Are they going to make it? It's usually a combination of action, okay, and there's some kind of crime, and it's personal. It's like the detective's wife is held hostage, or the heroine, it's her daughter is kidnapped or something like that. They make it personal. So the stakes are increased. So that's thriller. But anyways, these are essentially the three major types of series or trilogies. Or so why do you think these three genres have a series? Think about it. I'm not going to give you guys the answers all the time. I'm going to use Socratic teaching today, right? I ask you questions, and you guys got to think about it. The readers can become invested in a short story or a TikTok influencer or something. Cliffhangers is definitely like crime, mystery, thriller, but not necessarily always with fantasy and science fiction. All good fiction has a little bit of a cliffhanger at the end of every chapter. There's got to be some open-ended question like what's going to happen next, or now that we found out this piece of information, does it change everything? Something like that. How about this? Let's just do science fiction and fantasy. What do science fiction and fantasy have in common? Think about it from the author's perspective. You're writing a fantasy book or a science fiction book, world building. So the setting, think about you're in eighth grade and you're learning about writing, or you're in like English class or something. And what are the main things? There's the plot, there's the characters, there's the protagonist, there's the antagonist, there's the theme of the story, and there's this setting. This is sometimes you get so advanced that you forget the basic stuff. Basics, there's theme, main character, antagonist, what their goal is, and but you have to build a world. You've used the world builders inside of the Book Daddy app. So if you go to science fiction and you go to fantasy, what do they have in common? They have a world builder. So instead of a story generator, they have a world builder because you essentially can't write the story unless you have a giant world to build. What are the elements of the world? What are the elements of the world? Let's brainstorm together. What are some of the, like, think of, Harry Potter or Dune or Star Wars or the Hunger Games, a specific language, sometimes societal norms or rules, classes like societies, like families, guilds, essentially like types of people, oppressor, oppressed. That happens a lot. Languages, societies. And so there's usually the ice people or the wind people or the forest people or the desert people, ice, wind, forest. And then there's often what's the difference between fantasy and science fiction in terms of like the rules that they have? You know what the thing is, you can pull from the fantasy and science fiction are the most extreme versions of these. But you remember you have to like recognize patterns as a high level human, honestly. You have to recognize patterns. In Dune, you have the different families, and then the families represent what? Different planets. They like run different planets, and then they're parts of different planets. So it's multi-layered. There's different universes, there's different worlds, and then each family has what? They have a different, usually power. So a character always has pros and cons. There's like values that make them good and powerful, but then they also have either a dark side or something that's holding them back. We talked about this before. Story versus a B story. You remember the A story is the thing that they want. They want the treasure, they want to get the girl, they want to kill the dragon, They want to save the world. They want to beat the bad guy. They want to win the race. They want to get the award, whatever it is, right? They want to get the promotion. There's something that the character wants. And it could be in literary fiction, it's often something very subtle, like forgive their father for their horrible childhood or something. But there's something that they want, obviously, in the world. And then the B story is their internal emotional struggle whereby they have to learn something. And because they learn something, that thing that they learned allows them to win the A story. So the B story is the more emotional side, and the A story is what's happening in the world. So with fantasy and science fiction, all of this is the same, except you have to literally create the rules of the world. So one area might have a different gravity, or one school might have different magic trick. And each one of those rules, they inform everything. This is why fantasy and science fiction are so difficult to write. They're very difficult to write because before you can even write anything, you have to create all of this stuff, which is why the world builders inside of Book Daddy are so powerful because they skip the steps and now you have this world and you're like, okay, cool, now I can write. It's crazy, honestly. World building used to take like years just to build a world before you could even write a word. So we live in a pretty crazy thing right now. So terrain, ice, wind, forest, and then another one is their powers, different vices, different values, different magic, different laws of physics, things like that. You have all of this stuff. It's a whole, usually there's a map of the world. You have all of this that you need to build. Now, why is mystery and thriller kind of in this category? Because I think this is why some people confuse. The reason why mystery and thriller is in here is because you also have a particular world. It's not as intense as creating all of the new stuff, but what you need to do is you need to introduce the, because there's essentially a game that's being played. So there's this like map. And the game that's being played inside of a crime or a thriller is there are different guilds and factions. There's like the police department, and then there's the CIA, and then there's the bad guy group, and then there's the like rogue killers, and then there's their personal family. There's still these different groups that have different powers. Think of like James Bond or something. What happens? He always gets one of the things that happens is one of the technical guys always gives him these like little, oh, this is the cup, but it actually has poison in it. And so it's a game. The game has different rules and different powers and different groups. And then within this world, there's this is the second thing. What's the second thing that has to be built? Okay, world building. And then what's something else that's like really obvious? What's like in fantasy, science fiction, mystery, thriller, what is there like an obvious version of? Every core character kind of has a plot. Start in the middle, then go back to the beginning. Crime, mystery, thriller might not always follow the hero's journey and multidimensional layers of character setting, foreign cultures, and fantasy and science. So the main thing is that they all have an obvious hero. There's a new world. Think about this. Now, hopefully you start connecting the dots here. So you have this crazy world where people can get obsessed with it. And they have to learn the new world and the new rules and the new factions and all that kind of stuff. There's this world. And then there's usually an obvious hero. And the hero, what they do is that they go through this world, and in every single, let's say, chapter or like level of this world, what they do is they're doing multiple things at once. So you have this hero's journey. There's like old world, current situation. Then there's a exciting incident. And then there's a call to adventure. And then usually they say, no, I don't want to do it. And then what's after the new world? They go into the new world and then they meet the mentor. And then it starts the kind of classic hero's journey. So it goes up and then it goes down and then it goes up and then it goes down and then it goes up and it goes down. They're like, new problem, solve it, new problem, solve it, new clue, new problem, solve it. This is just like the video game of storytelling. And then each one of these is often like a chapter. Oh, how are they going to solve it? And then this is one chapter. And then eventually there's the final battle, and then there's a conclusion, and then et cetera, et cetera. Then it goes back in a circle. So this is like classic hero's journey. This grand middle part here in fantasy and science fiction, and in thriller in particular, each one of these is like a different world. They're like mini worlds within the world. Because at every stage you're meeting like a different character, a new planet, a new race, a new people. Each one of these is just fascinating to the reader because they're like, oh, they're on planet X, and then it's now they're on planet Y, but then on planet Y, they actually now they go to the spaceship, and the spaceship has different laws of physics, and then they actually go to the super villain room, and the villain room has the magic sword, and then it's every single new chapter or new part of the journey is not just discovering what is the hero going to do, it's also discovering this new world. It's, oh my God, this is crazy. This is a brand new thing. And so it's so juicy. Readers love it because it's really juicy. And then what ends up happening, you're going to get the punchline. What ends up happening with each one of these different worlds or different guilds, or it's, oh, this is the elves, and this is the dwarves, and this is the dragon people, and this is the windwalker people, and this is the ninjas, and whatever. But it depends on your story. But each one of these, because there's so many different guilds and societies and rules and laws and physics and magic, and think about the four houses in Harry Potter. And then in the third book, they were like, no, there's actually other schools. And then you learn about the other schools, and it's, no, there's actually the forest area, and then so you go to the forest area, and then that's different than like the Muggle world, and then it just there's different worlds within the larger world. In thriller and crime, it's not quite as extreme, but it's this part of the city, and then it's this gang, and then it's the corrupt cops, and then the CIA group, and then your family, and then you have to go to the different part of town and whatever it may be, but it still has that vibe. And you're following this one hero through this journey, whereby not only do you have a really fun A story, which is like they're trying to get the ring, or they're trying to kill the bad guy, or they're trying to solve the murder. So you have this really fun A story. The B story, if it's really high science fiction or high fantasy, then the B story will be good. That's the main difference between like high fantasy and low fantasy. High fantasy meaning that it's like more literary. So you have that. But the most important thing is that you have these worlds within the world. You see this with CIS or like all of these TV shows that have spin-offs, and they're like, oh, now it's in Miami, and now it's in New York, but now it's the firefighters, and now it's the police guys, but now it's the FBI. But it's like still the same story. The idea, Law and Order, every single one is like a different little universe. It's, oh, now we're going to be with like the baseball team, and like now we're going to be with the corrupt politicians. But it's the same hero, but you're putting them in different worlds. And now this is going to be the punchline as to should you write a series, yes or no? If you have a book that has a really strong setting like this, that has very strong world building and has a lot of different families, languages, laws, like little groups of people, and you have a very strong hero, what ends up happening is that when they get to the end here, because you've established a different universe, you can actually just copy and paste this into another book, and it just keeps going, but in different worlds. Or even within one of the worlds, you can start creating subcultures within that world. Or you can do, it's interesting because this is like the Mars guys. It's like this could be its own book. It's like the Mars story. Like, how did they start? And then you're like, oh, now they're on the ice planet. And so, wait, how did the ice planet start? Like now each one of these can be its own book, and it's another series. And what it does is it starts to fractal out, and you have this like tree trunk effect where because you created this world, you can now mold the clay of these different worlds and these different cultures and these different universes. How many different offshoots or fan fiction could you do of Star Wars or Harry Potter? Or you can say, oh, I'm going to do a whole series about the backstory of Voldemort. How many books could you write about the story of Voldemort? If you build the right worlds and the right rules and laws and magic within those worlds, you can take those worlds and even one character or a few characters or a family within that world, and you can start expanding it out into the future and in the past. Should you write a series, yes or no, always the answer is finish one book. But if while you're writing that one book, you have an extension of that world, this is how people end up. The only authors that make $100 million, let's say, or more, are fantasy and science fiction writers. Why is that? They really are. Like the Malcolm Gladwell or like Atomic Habits, they make maybe $10 million. They're very successful. But the really rich, like actually wealthy writers, they all write science fiction, fantasy, or mystery because they have a clear hero. They built worlds, and so therefore it can expand into like infinite number of people. So that was a fast little lesson. Go team. Bye bye.